So today we're going to be implementing the challenge that I talked about in my last video. So we're going to be making an app that when a button is pressed will make hello world appear on the screen. So this is our first programming lab, I guess you can call it. So this is going to be basically the starting thing you're going to have when you open up a new project. You're going to have all of this stuff already set up for you. So the idea here is to actually kind of go under the weeds and kind of see what Android Studio has already prepared for us. So here, I'm going to start with the Android manifest. So the Android manifest, as I talked about before, has some of the information about your app. So it has the activities right here. It has the package name right up here, and it has the icon that you're going to see on your launch screens, and a lot of other stuff. So this is basically written all for us, which is why I say Android Studio is such a useful tool. Then we have this screen. So this is a Gradle file. So Gradle describes how we're going, our dependencies and what we're going to be using in our app. So it also has the application ID. It has the information about the SDK version. So basically, different Android OSs, so like Marshmallow, Ice Cream, Lollipop, all of the older OSs, they correspond to SDK versions. And so this is going to basically describe what kind of system we need in order to actually run our app. So we might use a certain dependency that's in version, say, 20, but it's not in version 19. So then we need to specify here so that phones with Android version 19 don't access the app and then crash, obviously. Implementations here. So implementations are what we're going to use for APIs later on, kind of down the road. All right, so let's get to the actual business of making the app. So let's go to the res layout and then activity main. This is the layout file. So what I like to do actually is that I get kind of annoyed with working with constraint layout because it's a lot easier to use this drag and drop feature they have here. And it's a lot harder to do this with the constraint layout. So, or sometimes it doesn't exactly work the way you plan it out to be. And I find like it's easier to get started this way. So what I would do instead is to change this to relative layout. So I talked about layouts in my last video. So if you don't know what those are, just go and watch that. So relative layout, what this is going to do, give me one moment here. So what this is going to do is that it's going to specify kind of the the relative layout will specify the widgets on the screen relative to one another. So it'll have component later on when we talk about placement, it'll kind of say like to left of or to right of. So it'll kind of try to place the buttons and the text based on the screen based on where other components are already described. Okay, so now we're ready to have our first components. So the specification for this app is that we're going to have a button in the middle, and then up here we're going to have an empty text view initially, and then that text view, when the button is pressed, that text view will say hello world. So obviously we're going to need a text view for this, so we're going to put the text view right here. And you can see here, right here, Android Studio has just already given us kind of the information, the spec for this kind of stuff. So now we can see, basically this will just describe where it is, and you can see that as I move this, it's kind of updating the margin top, so it's updating kind of where the new placement is, and that is already managed for us by this drag and drop interface, so it makes everything very easy to start off. So we have the ID text view, and then we have the text inside of it. So initially, well, first of all, we want this to be a bit bigger. So how would we go about that? Well, as I said in my last video, I said that the properties of a particular widget are described in the XML. So here here is where we would describe kind of the font size stuff. So here we will go and say text size. So we're going to click that, and then here Android doesn't use pixels, it uses DP. Although you can use pixels, it's a lot easier to use DP because they scale on devices. So we're going to go ahead and say kind of a font size of like 40 DP. So that's really big. And then this text view, remember, it's supposed to be empty so that the text can show up when we click the button. So we're going to empty that text view. So no text initially, so it'll be invisible. Then after that, we're going to have a button at the bottom, or kind of near here. So this button, it can be a little fun here and say click me. And notice that when I type something here, when it's lowercase, it'll be uppercase on the layout. So that's important. So then text size, we can make this kind of, should be smaller than the button, or than the text view. So click me, and then also we have the ID button. So that'll be important here. So now here what we're going to do is that we have to essentially load these components into the Java space. So what that means is that we're going to need to use android.widget. So from the last video, I talked about this. So we're going to do this. We're going to put android.widget.asterisk. Don't get worried if this kind of grays out at the start. It's because we're not using it yet. So right now we're going to use it. So I presume most of you already know some stuff about Java, so I'm just going to go ahead and get right into it. So TextView. So the way we declare new objects in Java, we say the name of the class, TextView, and then we name the object, so view equals new TextView. But unfortunately, we can't do that here. Here what we have to do is that we have to cast it. So TextView find view by ID, and then I think I covered this last video, r.id dot, and then what was the ID of our text view was just text view. So text view. And then here you can see if you get any errors, then that's probably build stuff. Sometimes what I like to do is that when I get build errors, I click this button, the one that looks like a hammer, and then that'll basically do a clean build of my project. So here, so also we want to do the same thing with the button, so we're going to do a very similar thing with the button. Button equals button find view by ID r.id dot button, and then that will load our button. Alright, so now here's the tough part, is implementing the OnClickListener. I talked about that last video. If you don't know what that is, you should watch that. So button dot set OnClickListener, and then Android Studio will auto-complete it for me here. If I just say OnClick, if I just start to type OnClickListener, one second, OnClickListener, technical difficulty there, sorry about that. Okay, so now we've loaded this OnClickListener. So what this basically does is that it allows us to control what this button will do when clicked. And so when clicked, what do we want it to happen? We want this text view, this one specified right over here, we want it to have the text hello world. So we're going to say view.setText hello world. Now I'm getting an error here. Sorry about that bit of a technical difficulty there. So basically what happened was that I set the text view into view. So that was the same name as what's here. So a bit of a learning moment. Don't make that mistake. So name these more specifically. So view, and then we have text here. So we have to name them differently or else the compiler won't know what we're talking about. So now it looks like we're ready to build our app. So right here it's building. And sometimes this can take a while. So alright, so I have a virtual device loaded here. So this is the emulator I was talking about last video. So this will, so here we go. Now we're ready to go. So this again can take a bit of a time. Alright, so you can see Gradle invocation finished. That means that the Gradle build is completed. Now this emulator will run. It takes some time to boot up. So target device to come online. So when that shows, that means that the build is completed, but the emulator has not set itself up yet. So now we have our emulator all set up and working. So now you can see if I click this will show up hello world, and now we have completed the lab.